I don't want no oil spoiling my shoreline. I like fish much better than crud. I like birds and things creeping and crawling. Won't trade no more oil for blood. The sun done give us all we need to make this country run. But that black demon oil's got us fussing and fighting, and I do believe it's time we was done. I don't want them nukes run by them kooks who think radioactivity is fun. No more three-headed frogs or kids with leukemia. Nuclear power ain't fit for a dog. The sun done give us all we need to make this country run. But that nuclear power's got us fussing and fighting, and I do believe it's time we was done. No nukes! Good morning, Toledo, and good afternoon, Columbus, and hello to everyone listening on the internet, wherever and whenever you are. My name is Joe DeMar, and I'm here with
Rebecca Wood,
and together we're crafting that amazing show called For a Green Future. For a Green Future is a show where we talk about the environment, we talk about ecology, we talk about the way it affects you, your family, your wealth, your health, your happiness. And we have a really good show lined up for you today. We have a guest. His name is Jesse Deer in the Water, and he's going to be telling us about the Fermi nuclear power plant. We spend a lot of time talking about Davis-Besse because it's, had some close calls, nearly destroyed Toledo a couple times. But there's also another big nuke on the lake not far from Toledo called Fermi, and he's going to tell us all about that. Then we're going to do some updating on what's happening out there in British Columbia with the Wet'suwet'en tribe, some very intense things, and then some news, some general green part or ecology and environment news, of course our letter from the future, and an exciting event that you can participate in, something that is happening all over the world. It's called Unplug Nuclear Power. It's coming up on March 11th. We're going to talk about that. But first, just at the beginning in this first 15 minutes here, Rebecca and I were driving in this morning, and it was sunny, and it's going to be a really nice day. So definitely get out into some parks or get outside today with your family and friends. But I was thinking, this is not at all like the winters of my youth. This is.
I just heard on somewhere, I think television, internet, someplace, someone just invented the term climate whiplash.
Climate whiplash.
Which is really good. That's a term we've needed to describe what's happening with the weather.
Mm-hmm.
It's how, it's kind of April one day in the middle of January, and then suddenly snowpocalypse 3 days later.
Right. Well, yeah, true. But most of the time this winter, it's pretty much just sort of like it's been the past week or so, which is cold, but not a lot of snow. And I have to, so you have to kind of say winter with the quotation marks with the fingers up in the air.
But you can't really plan. That's the problem. I mean, it's a problem for me individually because I don't know what to wear to the bus stop, obviously. And who listens to wild and wacky stuff like the weather forecast? I, don't have that level of organization. But it's probably, I think, even a bigger problem for municipalities who need to figure out how much they're going to spend on fixing various weather-related things, salt, fixing potholes, all this stuff.
Oh, yeah, they buy so much salt every year, and I think one thing that they're doing is when there is a little bit of snow threatened or some possible sleet, they just get out there and dump a ton of salt because we're only using a fraction of probably what they budgeted.
Jeez.
But my question for you, my question for the audience is, how do you like this quote-unquote winter, this winter-ish kind of a winter? Call in at 866-240-1065.
Personally, I have trouble with it because I can't sort of emotionally settle into winter. It used to be I could sort of predict. It had a sort of a normal progression. It got a little cold, and it got a little colder, and I could sort of, hunker down and settle psychologically into survival mode for a couple of months, sort of enjoy the indoors, predict, but now it's kind of like, it's like an emotional roller coaster. It's like, oh, it's nice again. Oh, winter, slam,
Right. It's like with the flower petals, is it winter, is it not? Is it winter, is it not?
Right.
And you're not going to know till the end of it.
I have trouble with this. It's kind of like I have to go through the sort of fall, getting acclimated to winter thing over and over and over again.
True, yeah. So what do you think? 866-240-1065. Call in at any time during this hour about any sort of ecological or environmental question. But what we're asking you today to think about and maybe call in on is, do you like this kind of winter as opposed to like real winter, like 6 inches of snow on the ground, something you can go cross-country skiing in or sledding in, or do you prefer it like this? You don't have to do any shoveling. I've shoveled my walk twice this winter, and maybe people are preferring the post-global warming winter world here in Ohio, but I don't know. What do you think? Are you liking this kind of thing, or do you miss the excuse to have a fire on the outside, in the snow, roasting marshmallows and sledding and doing all that kind of stuff? Are you going to miss it or not? Give a call, 866-240-1065. So one thing that I did want to mention, something that Rebecca and I did this past week. As you know, last week we had on spokeswoman Molly from the Wet'suwet'en tribe, where they're fighting a pipeline expansion and being harassed by Royal Canadian Mounted Police. And they're not on horses; they're on armored
Dudley
vehicles.
Do-Right has gone terribly wrong, folks.
No, so there was a protest up in Detroit in support of them on the Canadian-American border. And so we went up there, and it was a nice protest, about close, going towards 100 people. It wasn't quite 100.
An awful lot of people saw us though, because we were right at the entrance to an exit to the tunnel.
That's true. We were very visible, and most people had no idea what was going on. But we have a caller, Carrie. You are on the line. Welcome to For a Green Future.
Hello. Yes. Okay. The comment I have about the weather is that it makes me sad because it's not what it should be, and it gives me as I gave the first talk, not a professional, whatever, but scientist, but, about global warming in like 1982 when my community college class, and it was like, so anyway, to me, it's a proof of it's an omen of worse things to come. So that's my comment.
Well, thanks very much. So the main emotion it's causing for you is sadness here, the lack of an actual winter. Oh, okay, yeah. All right. Well, thanks for the call, Carrie. And if anyone else has a comment, 866-240-1065. Do you miss winter? Do you miss having 6 inches of snow on the ground and actually trudging along on the trails and like being able to hear your footsteps in the snow? That's.
I think sadness and fear is among the reactions which a rational person might have, certainly.
Okay. All right. Well, so I just wanted to go back to the protest in Detroit, and it was a nice protest. It went well. Yes. Some clever chanting. I actually did a chant which didn't, which got nixed by the organizers. I was like, hey, let's do this chant. And I got the microphone, and as soon as I said it, they were like, no, we're not doing that.
Joe is a word person, so like myself, he always feels that more words is better.
Right, but because now I have a show, I'm going to go ahead and tell you the chant that I came up with, which is, let's see, Trudeau, what do we do with the Wet'suwet'en? And the response would have been, let them be, eh?
You can't even remember the words to the chant.
Well,
Joe.
But Well, I agreed not to do it, but I think it was a good chant. And
they had potential.
Yeah, we have an update on that story after the break, after we hear from our sponsors. But one person we ran into at the protest is someone that the next guest on our show. His name is Jesse Deer in the Water, and this is just showing that we environmentalists, the press likes to portray us as being all divided up. Like, you've got the anti-nuclear protesters over here, and you've got the anti-fracking protesters over there, and you've got the anti-logging or the anti-oil protesters over there. But
and people have to specialize. I mean, if you just tried to do everything, you'd go. So, I mean, even if that was true, what would be the harm, True,
but ultimately, we all get together. Ultimately,
right, we do.
The anti-frackers understand the anti-nuclear positions, and the anti-nuclear people understand the anti-oil and support them. And
yeah, basically.
And that really came true. I saw that displayed when we had the People's Climate March in New York City, when 400,000 people marched in protest of the climate inaction, and we all loved each other, if you know what I mean. You'd see that, like, the vegan float would come by, which was this huge cow that said, "Don't eat me," or something like that, and we'd be like, "Hey, vegans," and the vegans would be like, "Hey, no nukers," and the anti-frackers would be going by, and we all get along in the anti-nuclear movement. The press likes to sort of try to paint us as being divided into camps. But
in the environmental movement.
Yeah, in the environmental movement. Ultimately, all our camps are actually one big camp. And so I'm very happy to have online our guest for the day, Jesse Deer in the Water. Welcome to For a Green Future.
Hey, good morning. Thanks for having me.
Yeah.
How are you guys this morning?
I'm pretty good. How are you, Rebecca?
Not too bad, yeah.
All right. And how are you, Jesse? I know you were texting about needing coffee. Did you?
No. It would have been my second cup, so it's not like it's not like I'm off to that slow of a start.
All right. All right. So you've already got the jump start going. All right.
Yes.
Well, Jesse, I wanted you to come on the show today because our program, we spend a lot of time talking about Davis-Besse, the nuke plant here in Ohio, but just a few miles away, just over the border, is Fermi, and it poses just as big a threat to Lake Erie as all the other nukes on the lake. Could you tell us a little bit about Fermi and some of the history and what's going on up there with? Oh, first of all, tell us about your organization, CRAFT, if you would.
All right. Let me see here. All right. CRAFT is Citizens Resistance at Fermi II, and we oppose the operation of the Fermi II nuclear reactor. We'd like to see it decommissioned and the waste that's stored there removed from the Great Lakes, Lake Erie, and we would also like to see the power produced by renewable resources, solar, preferably rooftop with community ownership over the grid, and ideally, to make that transition, it would be nice to see, trade schools / community colleges to train everybody how to do it. But, that's just a little bit about CRAFT. It was formed in 95 after the Fermi II nuclear reactor threw a turbine, and they tried to continue to run it, and a group of people came together. That was long before my time. Even though I was actually around then, but, I wasn't a part of CRAFT.
You were probably still like in elementary school, I'm guessing.
Yes, middle school, maybe.
Middle school, yeah. Yeah, okay.
All right, the Fermi site occupies over 1,200 acres and 1.8 miles along the Lake Erie. The Detroit River International Wildlife Refuge manages 650 of those acres, so there's like a wildlife refuge right next to it. It began its commercial operations in '88, and let's see here. As of this year, there's a total of 18 casks that are loaded and sitting on a concrete slab there.
Casks. So those are casks filled with spent fuel rods with nuclear waste?
Yes, sir. Yes, yes. Yeah, and that's waste sitting on Lake Erie. It's the same model as the Fukushima reactor, except for it's the largest in the world. And so,
that's reassuring. Not.
Yeah. We kind of seen, the dangers of what happened over there, and though the rising water levels in Lake Erie aren't necessarily a tsunami, but one of the things we worry about is what's the rising water going to look like, in the future, and I guess. DTE did a study, and they miscalculated, and I think they were actually received a violation because of it. They miscalculated the rising water levels in one of their calculations for something. I don't know. There's just so much going on with it right now. Like literally every day, there's like something else.
I watched a documentary this past week. It's a really good series. It's called, Drain the Oceans, or they also did Drain the Great Lakes. And it turned out I learned something on that I didn't know is that, we all heard, the lakes used to be huge from the glaciers and then they've shrunk. Well, there was actually a point at which they were much smaller than today. They got down to about a third their current size.
Wow.
But then some weather pattern shifted, and there was just this really long period of just constant rain, and that's what filled them back up to the levels that they're at. So under the lakes, there's all these like Stone Age encampments and things that are buried at the bottom that are just under the lakes because it used to be hunting and fishing territory, and then just the weather shifted a little bit for geologically a little while, like a couple 100 years or a year, 100 years or so, and all of a sudden the levels of the lake like tripled. So we're entering a very uncertain climate period. Something like that could happen again. I mean, these high lake levels could not just become normal; they could actually, the lake could keep rising.
Yeah, grow to be a third bigger.
Yeah. So you had them trying to operate even though they threw a turbine, which is incredibly dangerous. You've got them storing nuclear wastes on the shore with a shore which is shifting as we speak, literally as we speak. So what other sorts of things are you concerned about with? Oh, and plus you've got the Fukushima design, which one thing people remember Chernobyl, which was a terrible nuclear accident. But one thing about that accident, Chernobyl was what's called a graphite-moderated reactor. That is that instead of water under pressure and steam, it actually used graphite to cool and to moderate the nuclear reaction. After Chernobyl, the U.S. shut down all its graphite reactors. We had about 7 of them, and so that was sort of a silver lining because they realized, hey, all this.
For one brief shining moment, our government made a rational decision.
Right, but after Fukushima, the obvious flaws with this model reactor were clearly demonstrated by exploding reactors. But
Oopsie-doo.
But we didn't shut them down the way we shut down the graphite reactors.
Oh, man.
Yeah. So.
Sorry. Go.
Yeah. So what other things about Fermi concern you folks?
All right. One of the things that we're concerned about is they've applied to use a new fuel, and I'm not totally familiar with it. I need to do some more researching, but it's manufactured by Global Nuclear Fuels. It's called GNF3. And I guess there's a couple other places that are using it. We're kind of concerned that since it's some sort of, we think it might come from out of the country, and so we're concerned that it's bringing in something from across the ocean and transporting it here. It just seems like it's a lot, and so this is something we're going to be looking into more. Mm-hmm. Right now, we currently have another thing going on. The DTE has requested an amendment to eliminate their license extension condition, and before they got their 20-year extension, they committed to replacing their degraded Boraflex neutron absorbing panels in their spent fuel pool.
Okay.
And these neutron absorbing materials keep the rods from going critical, and the old Boraflex absorbers had degraded, so DTE said they would replace them with boral as a NAM. That starts using a bunch of different stuff, but as far as words and acronyms and stuff go, but anyway, they found a way to save money and make and do it faster by proposing to install an alternative, which are these snap-in neutron absorber inserts, and this is something we've currently filed. We've currently filed against. We were denied access to sensitive information, which we felt like we needed, and so we don't really know how far this filing is going to go. But these are some other things that we're currently concerned with, and overall, we're just currently. We're concerned with DTE, and how they're managing Fermi and. How they're doing a lot of things in general. We feel like they may be cutting too many corners, and that's taking away from the safety of the plant and the safety of the people within the 50-mile radius of the plant.
Yeah, nuclear power is not something you can do on the cheap. Cut corners. Eventually, one of those corners. Everything's going to collapse because you've finally cut the wrong corner. I remember there's I lived in Western New York, and they had a salt mine there. And they had this cool idea. Some engineer said, oh, hey, the mine had grown to the size of Manhattan under the ground, so they had to take trucks and go all the way to the other end and back. And some bright engineer said, hey, all these pillars that we've left to hold the roof of the cavern up, they were over-engineered. We don't need pillars, that are 15 feet wide. We could do pillars that are 10 feet wide.
Is this story going to end with a giant hole?
Many. Yeah, like a giant sinkhole, or like people getting crushed.
Oh,
yes. You've seen the end of the story. Yes, they literally cut the corners on these pillars.
No.
And eventually, yes, they cut the wrong one finally and took it too small, and the whole mine collapsed. And there's sinkholes all over Western New York now, and it's a terrible thing. And people don't know that those spent fuel pools that you were talking about, there's more fuel in the spent fuel pool than there is in a nuclear reactor, because as those rods get overused, as they get too radioactive to keep inside the reactor, they keep getting shoved into these pools, and they've steadily been shoving those rods closer and closer together. So if something goes wrong with those neutron absorbers that you're talking about, those pools will become nuclear reactors again, and they have the potential to melt down and create a bigger disaster than if the nuke plant itself melted down. So these very serious things.
Yeah, these are all serious things. All right, so I come from Oklahoma originally. Deer and Water is a Cherokee name, some of my ancestors, walked on the Trail of Tears, and then some of my other ones are some of the Cherokees that left on their own before any of that even happened. But we ended up there in Oklahoma, and there was a uranium processing plant there, and I grew up around people the fight to close that down, and they were cutting corners, they were burying waste illegally, and so I've seen with and experienced in my own life. It's now a Superfund site, the Kerr-McGee uranium processing plant.
Oh wow, you lived near that? Oh man, I did not know that, Jesse.
My mom is one of the people that started Native Americans for a Clean Environment, or helped start, along with other people. But yeah, and pushed against that. But yeah, so I've experienced in my lifetime, how cutting corners and people doing things that are shady can lead to the next, can lead to the next worst thing. And that also brings me to another thing, growing up there in Oklahoma, people say baling wire and duct tape can fix anything, but that's just like a car, a little like a lever on a car or a piece of a fence. That's not a nuclear reactor, and it feels like that's what DTE is doing. They're putting duct tape and baling wire on a nuclear reactor with some of these corners that they're cutting, and this is
not good.
This is nuclear power. Yeah, this isn't a fence to hold your goats in.
Does anyone else watch the Red Green show? Because I'm now picturing Red Green fixing our
running a nuclear plant.
Yeah, right.
It's not.
Yeah, it's funny and scary.
Yes, yeah. Right.
Huh.
Yeah.
Wow. So Jesse, there was talk for a while of a Fermi III plant. I mean.
Oh, yes, brings me to a good thing too.
Yeah, Fermi I was the liquid sodium reactor that actually partially melted down on the same site, and then now we have Fermi II. But there was talk of Fermi III. Tell us a little bit about that.
All right. So they got the license to build Fermi III. But I can't tell you everything about the reactor itself. I know that it was some sort of monster one. I just came back to Michigan as that was kind of like leveling off, and but I can tell you some things about it. I can tell you that they have the license to build it. I think that it feels like they're just sitting on it until they need it, I just came across an article where it says that DTE is willing to work on technological advances that we see coming in the future. Things like carbon capture and sequestration, storage technologies, and even advanced modular nuclear. The advanced modular nuclear means the development of mini reactors, which are the small modular reactors.
Mm-hmm.
They can produce anywhere from 100 to 150 megawatts of electricity. So, the Fermi III threat that was or that's still there, they have the license to build there on that site. A group is still there, and this is like new developments, and so this is why I read that, because DTE was just sent back to the drawing board. Are you guys familiar with any of the stuff that's been going on up here with DTE's integrated resource plan?
Not terribly, no.
Well, they had drawn out a plan for their next 15 years worth of power and or energy production. I'm trying to think of the good way to word it, but yeah, and they're talking about going carbon neutral, and they're closing, coal plants. But the thing is that they're building these gas plants.
Oh, well, that's bad.
Yeah, they're building the gas plants, and the gas is going to be coming from the Nexus pipeline, which they're 50% owners with Enbridge on, and it's coming from the fracking area, where some would say that they're all owners of the fracking waste, and I mean of the fracking.
Yeah, we're very familiar with the Nexus pipeline. We talk quite a bit about that on the show, as they were forcing it through Ohio, literally violating the property rights of thousands of Ohioans because they used eminent domain to take people's properties for a private company. There was no public benefit to Ohio from this, because literally the gas was coming from southeast Ohio and going up to you guys in Michigan. So there was no benefit to Ohioans, but they still used eminent domain to just steal people's property. It was terrible.
And then going to Canada from here, because I think it's only 14% of the gas was used here in Michigan.
Mm-hmm.
And I think upwards of 30%, 36 or something like that percent would be used here in Michigan in the future with their gas plants that they want to build. Because they want to build a bunch of gas plants in their IRP and keep their nuclear running and cancel out some coal plants and only build up to I think it was 600 megawatts of solar in their plan. So anyway, this kind of goes back to them getting sent back to the drawing board on their plan, but they're keeping it open for the advancement of modular reactors, and so that could mean that potentially they could want to build these an SRM or two to replace the gas plants on the Fermi III site. So this is something else that's kind of like unfolding like right now as we speak.
Okay.
And so this is one thing that I think I'm going to work with try to work with some other groups here in southeastern Michigan to see if we can't bring this to light and try to make the public aware that they have the license to build the Fermi 3, but they're not building it. But right here they say that they're on the lookout for advancements in nuclear technologies, and so they could, let's not forget about this within the next couple of years. Is kind of like what I'm saying.
All right. Well, thanks, Jesse, for keeping on this and keeping the fight going. If people want to find out more about your organization, where would they go? How would they find out about it?
All right. So, I'm going to be honest. We're a group of all volunteers. And right now my task is the website, and it's going to be up and running, and it's going to be shut down Fermi, but it's not running yet, so I don't want to send people there. But if anyone's interested, they could at this moment they could go to Facebook. We have a group there. It's just called Craft, CRAFT, and it has a picture of a giant mock canister on it and a few of us standing in front of it, and that's our group. And you can go there, and we upload documents, filings, our newsletter. If they wanted to, for the moment, I'm probably going to have this website up in the next week. They could contact you and leave an email, and that could, if they want to subscribe to our newsletter,
okay.
And we could retrieve that from you in the next couple of days. If it worked out like that, but
okay,
yeah,
sure. I'll help you out with that. My email is joe@joedemare4agreenfuture.org. That's JOEDEMAREFOR greenfuture.org. So yeah, if you let me know if you want to hear about Craft, and I'll forward your email over to them. The signal here from 106.5, the ticket, reaches well up into Michigan. I mean, we reach almost all the way to Detroit. So there could be some people who are living very near to there. I know we definitely go in Monroe, which is where Fermi is. So I just want to thank you, Jesse. Is there any last thing on your list there that we didn't hit that you want to?
I feel like we should just briefly also discuss Mr. Deer and Water's sign that he had at the protest, because it kind of made the demonstration for me.
Oh, did you see that?
Would you care to describe it?
Not only just working with Craft, but I also do work within, the urban Native American community, and have been involved, with my peoples and other people's peoples, my whole life. And so the extractive industry, whether it be nuclear, coal, gas, even just the spiritual tactics of the extraction, breaking people down and taking things away from them, is deep, and it all comes with colonialism, which is kind of like we're surrounded by it, swimming in it.
Which resulted in your protest sign, which said...
Yes. Yes. Oh, extract these nuts, because
Gotcha. I had no idea there was so much deep thinking behind that sign. Okay. Well,
me and my oldest daughter wanted. We're finding ways to put modern culture into the signs, because she helps make a lot of signs, and so she's always putting the funny stuff in there. And so I was like, "Wow."
All right. Well,
yeah,
all right, Jesse. Well, thanks very much. I hope that didn't offend too many of our listeners. But, actually, most of the people who are on their way to church have already arrived.
You gotta hope, yeah.
Yeah. Well, but
all right, on.
Thanks, Jesse, for coming on the show. And was there any last thing you wanted to say?
Thank you for having me on here. Sorry if I might have been a little choppy. This is my first time actually coming on a radio show like this.
Oh, you did fine.
Yeah.
And everyone knows what we need to do. When we look inside of our heart, and how we can act on things in our daily life. And so that's what I do personally. And so I can't tell anyone to do anything, and I can't say people should do this, that, or the other. But I can say that we need to trust in ourselves if we want to trust in other people and trust that we can make these changes and make these differences that we need to make. So I just want to let everybody know we need to trust in ourselves. Trust in yourself.
All right, Jesse.
Good idea.
Deer in the Water. Thanks so much for being on For a Green Future. So.
All right. Thank you.
All right. Well, that was a pretty fun interview,
yes,
actually.
It was.
What did you folks think of Jesse, Deer in the Water? Call in and give us your impressions at 866-240-1065. That's 866-240-1065. And we'll take your call on any environmental issue. And one thing that we love talking about on For a Green Future is our sponsors.
Indeed.
Yes, and our show is brought to you by the Wood County Park District. Wood County Park District is a natural resources conservation agency. They protect natural spaces, maintain quality green spaces. They provide engaging programming, and they teach people to love and respect nature, restore wildlife habitats, and lead outdoor adventures. Wood County Parks protects 20 parks and nature preserves around Wood County, which are open from 8 a.m. to 30 minutes past sunset every day of the year. And for those of you who don't know where Wood County is, it's just south of Toledo. So, it's worth making a trip in from out of county because they've got some really nice parks. And you can check those parks out on their website, which is wcparks.org. Or you can call them at 419-353-1897. And finally, they have a nifty app, which you just go to the App Store and download. WC Parks is the name of the app. It's free, and you can check in anytime. And on a beautiful day like this, when you're sitting around the house saying, what the heck are we going to do? You can say, hey, I'll check my WC Parks app. And,
there you go.
And see what's going on at the parks. So, and by way of public service, I'm going to tell you about a couple things that are happening at the park. And we're happy to announce events by any environmental organization. Just send them to me at joe@joedemar4agreenfuture.org. And unless it's something we disagree with, we will most likely we'll announce it on the air. And just two things to announce this week for the Wood County Parks. One is frog monitor training. That's going to be, that happened last week. So just two things. One is beekeeping for you. That's Tuesday the 25th, 5:30 to 8 o'clock p.m. at the J.C. Ruthinger Memorial Preserve. That's at 3730 Oregon Road in Perrysburg. And they're just going to talk to you about intro to beekeeping, how to do it, what it costs. Is it something you might be interested in? Then the other thing that we're telling you about is Wednesday, February 26th, 6:30 to 8 p.m. at the WW Knight Nature Preserve. It's going to be Animals of the Nature Center. And they're going to talk about the animals that live there in the nature preserve, the animals that call it home. And so you're going to get to meet them up close and learn a little bit about each one. It's a family-friendly program. So to register for these, you can go to their website, wcparks.org, or call them at 419-353-1897. And I also wanted to say that our show is also brought to you by our Patreon sponsors, for whom we're extremely grateful. We couldn't bring the show to you without them. And if you want to become a Patreon sponsor of For a Green Future, you just go to patreon.com. That's Patreon. Search there in their search engine for a Green Future. We'll pop right up. We have different monthly memberships. We've got memberships for dog lovers and memberships for cat lovers. And
do we?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I didn't know that.
It's the same level, same dollar
Right,
level, because we love dog and cats equally.
Right, but we have to figure out which is best once for all, I guess.
Right.
By this way, yeah.
So far, the dogs are in the lead, I have to say. So
Okay.
you cat people, if you want to, put one up for your team, you might want to consider becoming a member at that cat level of membership. So those are our sponsors. And so now we're going to move on to eco news and things that are happening environmentally speaking. Oh, my, we're running kind of late here.
Uh-oh.
So I just want to very quickly, though, mention something that happened to me personally. I do Facebook. I do it too much. It's an addiction. That's unhealthy, I know, but
I think your idea of too much is people's idea of not enough, but
that could be.
Yeah.
But one thing Facebook does is it throws up old posts to you just out of the blue. And Facebook threw up a 10-year-old post to me where it was during the Obama administration. It's when he decided with his energy policy to go all in on nuclear power and to give just a pittance, just a couple million here and there to wind and solar energy. And his big thing were the Vogtle nuclear plants. And those plants, it turns out he was completely wrong because they started construction on them 10 years ago, and they are now officially 5 years over budget and $14 billion over budget. They were initially supposed to cost $14 billion for the two. They're at $28 billion right now, and they have the company that's building them has just asked for the 20th increase in the cost estimate. So,
or as the nuclear industry likes to refer to this, early and under budget, they're calling this.
Right, because they keep changing the budget and changing the deadline for when they're going to start.
I really wish I could get away with some of this stuff in life.
I know.
I changed the time I'm supposed to arrive at work, so I'm actually early.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's exactly what they're doing. Wouldn't that be nice
That
to
would
be
be
able
so
to do
good.
that? According to them, they're now on time. And
This is actually more than the amount of rent which I've decided to pay.
right, just change the rules.
Right.
But their initial estimates were 4 years and $14 billion. They're at 5 years and $28 billion and counting. And so I just want to go on record. Obama was wrong. I was right. Because in the meantime, solar and wind all over the world have taken off, and the U.S. has fallen way behind other countries in that. We're at almost 1,000 gigawatts of wind power worldwide. It's just a staggering amount of power. And these two nuke plants have yet to generate a single watt, but they've already generated millions of tons of greenhouse gases in their construction and building the cement that has to be there. So Obama, you screwed up big time.
And Joe and I kind of apparently went through the same thing, that we both really kind of wanted to believe in Obama and, got sucked in at certain points. And yada, yada, this is how you either get to be Green Party or have your Green Party-ness confirmed.
Right. Well, this is not a political show. We're not pushing the Green Party here.
No, we're not, no.
But we are looking at issues, and, on the nuclear issue, Obama was just 180 degrees in the wrong direction. And yes,
Yeah.
I do admit one of the reasons I'm so upset with him is that I was one of his strongest proponents for his first term to get him into office initially, but it quickly became apparent that he was making bad decisions like this one over and over again. So that's enough of that. But speaking of bad decisions, the Premier of Canada is making a terrible decision. We have an update on the situation with the Wet'suwet'en tribe, which, as you recall, our guest last week was one of the people that are in these encampments that are blocking the construction of a pipeline, an oil or a gas pipeline, which would go right through unceded Native American territory to take gas from Canadian gas wells and ship them over to a port on the Pacific Ocean, which would ship them right over to Asia. So there's this huge, environmentally terrible project to benefit Asia. And so the Wet'suwet'en are standing on their sovereign rights and saying we're not going to allow this to happen. And this is one of the biggest, literally one of the biggest, most dramatic environmental stories, not just of the year, but I think of the decade.
Yeah.
Because the protests have spread all over Canada. 2 weeks in, rail traffic is still stopped in most of the country of Canada.
It should be.
Because native tribes all around Canada are blocking rail lines, and they're blocking roads, and they're blocking ports, and there's still an encampment on the steps of Parliament. This is a tremendous story, and I'd like to ask, one thing I'd like to ask you folks, call in before the show ends. Have you heard about this anywhere else? Call in at 866-240-1065. Have you seen this story on the news? Have you heard about it on the radio? Is anybody else reporting on this amazing, dramatic story?
Mm-hmm.
And so the update on it is just that the natives have refused to back down. Trudeau is still just telling everybody to stop. He's just saying stop. But he's moved from insisting, to threatening. Now he's threatening to send the Mounties in force and just literally throw everybody on this unceded territories into jail. So
unceded meaning that they never agreed to let their land become Canadian land. Not even at gunpoint, they never signed a treaty.
That's right. It's never been part of Canada. And the United Nations Committee on Racial Discrimination has specifically told the Canadian government, back off. This is exactly the sort of horrible thing that the Western nations have done to the indigenous peoples all over the world. And, you're doing it right now. Stop.
So just keep your little maple syrup sticky fingers off of it.
Right. So we're going to keep watching that. And
that's the best I can do in terms of Canada bashing.
I know. Usually they're so nice.
Yeah.
I love Canada. I love their healthcare system. But
so disappointing. Very disappointing.
And there's one of the tribes fighting it. One of the tribes that's maintaining a camp is the Unistoten tribe, and their matriarchs who were doing a ceremony to honor and to remember the indigenous women who've disappeared and been kidnapped and killed on the territories, because this is a real thing. The men in those oil encampments, literally it's documented, they go out and they kidnap and they kill Native women in their regions, and it's terrible. But so they got arrested, but the tribe made a statement. We have the strength of our ancestors within us. We have the solidarity of our indigenous relatives and allies with us. We have the power of people shutting down railways, highways, ports, and government offices all around this country. Thank you to people all around this planet making our struggle your struggle. The flames of resistance and the resurgence of indigenous land reclamation give us strength. We know our neighbors and relatives are with us. We know the two-leggeds and the four-leggeds are watching over us. These arrests don't intimidate us. Police enforcement doesn't intimidate us. Colonial court orders don't intimidate us. Men in suits and their money don't intimidate us. We are still here. We will always be there. This is not over. So,
because when you show people we can do whatever we want to you, we can just come through and arrest you for being on your own land.
Yeah, for literally just living.
That's such a power dynamic. That sends a message. Oh, people can do whatever they want to you because you're a non-person.
It's pretty bad.
Yeah.
But we're going to keep following it, and thank the Lord the troops have not been sent in yet, and hopefully they never will be. Hopefully this will resolve.
You have
in
some
favor
sense
of all of us.
Some shame. Canada really, you know.
So that was off the Unistoten Camp's website, which is one of the tribes that are fighting that pipeline. All right, then on to other news. This is a very nuclear-focused episode of For a Green Future. Great news in France. Their oldest nuke plant, the Fessenheim nuke plant, that has 2 reactors on it. One of them closed yesterday forever.
Good riddance.
I know. Whenever a nuke plant closes, I allow myself a day of bliss. This has been a blissful 24 hours. And the second reactor on that site will be closing in June. So Fessenheim is this terribly old reactor. It's right on the border with Germany. And for decades, the Germans have been saying, France, you're getting your nukes all over us.
It sort of sounds like a cuss word, too. I'm just saying Fessenheim.
Fessenheim, yeah, it's not a cuss word. We're not forbidden to say Fessenheim.
No, we can say Fessenheim all we want.
Okay. And then also in France, another story which has not gotten any press that I could see is a bunch of Greenpeace activists have went and occupied the Tricastin nuclear plant They actually got into the control room. They were carrying styrofoam jackhammers because they want the plant dismantled. So they walked into the plant and pretended to use their styrofoam jackhammers on the dome and stuff. And
did it actually collapse from the because it was so unstable? No, thank
luckily.
God. Yeah, that was a dangerous move on their part.
But they got arrested. And one thing though that this illustrates, these were Greenpeace protesters armed with nothing but styrofoam jackhammers, and they got into the control room of a nuclear power plant.
Oh, that's great.
And one of the things about nuclear power is that every nuclear plant is potentially a tremendous nuclear dirty bomb.
Yeah.
And if people with bad intent, if people who had machine guns instead of styrofoam jackhammers had gotten in there with the purpose of causing that plant to melt down, they would have succeeded.
That's not supposed to be a soft target right there.
No, nuclear plants are supposed to be the most heavily guarded things.
You'd think.
But I remember a video a few years back, actually it was during the Obama administration, somebody decided to test the security, and he just drove his car right up to the entrance of the reactor room. And there was a big fuss made, and the Department of Energy said, oh, well, most of our actual security measures you can't see.
Okay.
And, I think actually because
but if you can't see them
exist.
And your car is all the way all the way up to the reactor,
right,
would you be able to see it before if your car was loaded with explosives? If you drove it into the reactor, would you be able to see it then before that happened? You gotta hope.
Maybe then you'd see it. Maybe it would stay invisible.
Maybe
I don't know.
One worries. Yeah.
But but hats off to those protesters. In my opinion, they've been arrested. They've accepted the responsibility for their action. This was an act of conscience. They're trying to protect France from these reactors, which have contaminated the water of 6 million French people with radioactive tritium. So it's a dire situation over there, and they did something dramatic and drastic. But again, it's not getting covered. This is not something the mainstream news is going to tell you because so many people like Bloomberg, for example, push nuclear power as an answer to the climate crisis, and it just isn't. All right, but we do know that we are going to solve the climate crisis, and we're going to shut down all these nukes permanently. And how do we know this, Rebecca?
Oh, my gosh, did we get a letter from the future again?
We did.
Wow.
My great-great-granddaughter, Marie I. And here's this week's letter. Dear GGG, greetings from the year 2300. I am still in New York City. After what happened on Mars, I wasn't prepared to simply head back to work. I've been exploring the city and thinking about the differences between your time and mine. One big difference is Central Park is much bigger. It extends west now all the way to the river. I've spent a lot of time walking in it this past week, getting my Earth legs back after all that time I spent in low gravity. I'll walk along, looking at the people and the trees, the flocks of birds, the hawks and the eagles. It's still deep winter, so no buds on the trees yet, but there are bird feeding stations. One thing I like to do is sit watching them on benches that are sheltered by solar panels. The benches have built-in heaters that activate only if someone sits on them. There are more birds now than in your day. Pigeons are still here, but there are also more of the colorful native songbirds like redpolls and grosbeaks. The people of New York City are still pretty much the same. They talk loudly, very fast, and every one of them seems to be rushing off to do something extremely important. Also, the people of Manhattan are still unimpressed by celebrity. I've been grateful that I can just walk the streets here without being harassed by strangers asking me about what happened on Mars. I'm still giving several interviews a day, but attention has finally started tapering off. The streets, as I've said, don't have cars. People are on foot or bicycle or pedicabs. Some of the same buildings are here, but they're covered on three sides by enormous vines that trail down from the top. The south sides are glass, like in your day, but it's glass that is also a solar cell that generates electricity. There are no beggars, though, no drug addicts lying on the steps of the building. There's no crime to speak of. The last murder in New York City was 2 years ago, and it made headlines. I'm very interested in your time, great-great-grandpa, but I prefer mine. Thank you. Love, Marie I.
I'm sure that's less exciting without all the wild and craziness, but it sounds like they keep busy anyway.
Yeah, that's the thing. Humans will always find something to keep them busy.
There you go.
So, all right. Well, speaking of keeping busy, we actually have time for one more call. If someone would like to call in at 866-240-1065. We're very grateful to Carrie for calling and remembering how winters used to be.
Yeah.
And if anyone else would like to chime in on that, we would still like to hear from you. Rebecca, last week, since this is Black History Month, we were talking a little bit about some famous black environmentalists, and we were talking a little bit about Ken Saro-Wiwa. And I think you have some more information about him, don't you?
Yeah, I educated myself a teensy bit about Ken. It was actually, let's see, his full name was Kenule Beeson Saro-Wiwa. Saro-Wiwa. He was born in 1941 on land belonging to the Ogoni peoples of Nigeria. It's in the delta of the Niger River. So he would have had a pretty good childhood and in sort of teenage years, because it was really lush, fertile area. His people were hunters and farmers and fishermen, so they were doing pretty well. And then in 1958, oil was discovered there, and somebody called the Royal Dutch Shell Company came in and just decimated the place. By the time they were done, the fish, the wildlife, all gone. Literally, they say there were oil puddles the size of football fields lying around. So it was a very graphic before and after. Also, Royal Dutch Shell, I believe, made was it $30 million off of this, and there were 5,000 jobs involved. 100 Ogoni, the people who actually lived there, got jobs out of 5,000. So yeah, Ken Saro-Wiwa didn't appreciate this, and so he was he organized something called the Ogoni People's Survival Movement, I believe. Yeah, and yada yada. The Royal Dutch Shell bought the.
I just want to point out that was a non-violent political.
Yeah.
movement.
Oh, he got many awards for nonviolent resistance, and then the Nigerian government set up basically a trumped-up kangaroo court and convicted him of murdering some people and hanged him in 1995.
So it was actually the government that assassinated him at the behest of Royal Dutch Shell.
Basically, yeah.
Royal Dutch Shell is one of the owners of, quote-unquote, this proposed pipeline.
Oh, that's great.
So they're still around. They're still up to their old tricks.
Essentially, yeah. It's just still, people trying to survive and fighting for the ability to stay on their land.
All right. Well, thank you all so much for listening. This is Joe DeMar.
And Rebecca Wood.
Signing off.
No more three-headed frog.